It's Friday, and that means Questions with Father Luke. I'm Father Luke of Covenant Anglican Church. Today's question is, what can churches do to strengthen their pastors? And this is a great question. It shows love, for these guys who are trying to be in service to different communities. And it's a great question because it's easy for us to think of the work of the pastor on two extremes. On the one side, we can kind of easily think it's just this kind of joke, not joke. It suggests that pastors only work one day of the week. The other side of that is with the explosion of all the kind of leadership books in church and ministry, that there has been this increased professionalism and CEOifying of the pastorate. Now, both of these extremes are misunderstandings of what the work of real pastors, right? And they're dangerous positions for both the pastors and for the congregations to hold. A guy who is helpful, for me anyway, in correcting that, is Eugene Peterson. He's got a book called Working the Angles. He suggests that the main work of the pastor is not the obvious Sunday morning kind of work, nor the leading of the institutional structures of the church. Those things are very important. In fact, they're crucial to the pastoral work. But the main heart of the pastoral work, Peterson suggests, is prayer, scripture, and spiritual direction. And as anyone who has walked with somebody through trying experiences can attest, that this is often very exhausting work. And so your pastor is probably more exhausted than you realize, and definitely than he lets on. So what can you do to help your pastor, to strengthen him and encourage him? Well, I will say, in my experience here, I am blessed because I know that Covenant, our church, prays for me. They pray for my family. They pray for renewal, for protection, provision. And so I know it's a cliche thing to say, but persistent prayer for your pastors and for their families is wildly important for their strength and encouragement. Now, secondly, I'm blessed by a church that insists that I keep a Sabbath. So I Sabbath on Mondays. I don't check my emails. I don't answer phone calls sometimes. My family gives me time by myself. I go either to the shooting range, I go painting, I do some woodworking, something. But I just get to kind of rest. I'm untaxed by the never-ending work of church stuff. And so a church can strengthen and encourage their pastor by insisting that they have a regular rhythm of rest. If you want to know more about Sabbath keeping, perhaps we can answer that in another video at some point. But Sabbath keeping is not just for pastors, it's also for you. So ask that question. Now, a third way that Covenant strengthens and encourages me is they empower me to say no. Right? There are more needs in the world and in our community, in any one community, than what one person can adequately handle. And as a pastor, I know that means I've got to equip and I've got to empower others, the saints, to do the work of the ministry, as Paul says in Ephesians 4. Now, this is going to require systems to be built. It's going to require counseling sessions to be held and lessons to be taught and so on. Now, our leadership team, our vestry, we meet at least once a month. I meet also with our senior warden. We check in regularly, and they help me, right? Who has a tendency to want to do too much at times, right? They help me to pause and to evaluate my own rhythms, and they encourage me to say no to things. And so that's really been a blessing. So being empowered to say no and having healthy rhythms of rest and of work, and a congregation that is faithful to be persistent in prayer for their pastor and for their families, that goes a long way in ensuring your pastor's health and encouragement. In the comments below, why don't you share some practical ways that you've seen pastors be encouraged or strengthened by their churches? Or even better yet, visit us here at Covenant Anglican Church and let's continue the conversation. But let's connect.